When I was 15, my best friend and I promised we'd marry if we were single at 30. Next week, we'll have a wedding. It was the summer we both turned 15. The air smelled like fresh cut grass, bonfires, and adventure. Sam and I spent nearly every day outside, biking around our small town or lounging in the field behind his house. One night, after a long day of doing absolutely nothing and feeling like it was everything, Sam rolled over on the grass beside me, propping his head on his hand, his eyes sparkling under the stars. "Hey," he said, breaking the silence. "Hey," I mimicked, smirking as I stared up at the sky. What if we made a pact?" His voice sounded serious, too serious for Sam. I rolled my eyes, half jokingly. "A pact? What, like some blood brothers thing?" He chuckled, nudging me with his shoulder. "No, you dork. I mean a real one. Like a life pact." I raised an eyebrow. "Okay, I'm listening. What kind of life pact are we talking about?" He hesitated, looking up at the stars, then back at me. "All right, so my grandma always says that everyone should have a person, you know? Someone to rely on, like, no matter what." "Yeah," I said, a little confused. "So?" He took a deep breath, his face suddenly serious. "What if, by the time we're 30, if we're both still single, we get married?" I burst out laughing. "Are you serious? Sam, we're 15. 30's practically ancient." He laughed with me, but his gaze held a glimmer of sincerity. "Yeah, it sounds silly. But think about it, we wouldn't have to worry about finding someone, dealing with all the dumb dating stuff. We'd just be there for each other, you know? Forever." I gave him a sideways glance, still laughing a little but curious now. "So, are you saying we'd be, like, old married people together?" "Exactly." He grinned, holding out his hand. "So? Are you in or what?" I stared at his hand, then back at him. "Fine, but you're buying the pizza at our wedding." "Deal." He shook my hand firmly, and we both lay back, our laughter fading into the night. As we got older, that night became a funny story to tell. We'd bring it up whenever one of us went through a breakup or had a rough time dating. But through all of it, we stayed best friends. Even when I left for college out of state and he stayed in town, we were always just a text or a call away. When we were 24, during one of my trips home, Sam and I were walking around our old neighborhood, catching up. I was nursing a freshly broken heart, and Sam was just being his comforting, goofy self. "Still single at 24, huh?" he teased, elbowing me as we walked. I laughed, nudging him back. "Says you, Mr. Too busy to date because of work." He shrugged, smiling. "Hey, maybe it's just fate. Maybe we're supposed to wait for each other." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, come on. You don't actually believe in that pact, do you?" He looked at me, his smile fading a little. "I don't know. Maybe I do. I mean, you're my best friend. Why not?" I felt a strange tug in my chest, something warm and unfamiliar. "Yeah, well, we've got 6 more years to figure that out," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. He just looked at me for a second longer, his eyes soft. "Yeah. 6 years." As 30 crept closer, life started to feel heavier. I was 28 when I called him after yet another breakup, feeling utterly defeated. "Hey, Sam? You busy?" His voice, warm and calm as always, replied, "For you? Never. What's going on?" I sighed, flopping down onto my couch. "Just tired. Of dating. Of everything." "Another breakup?" he guessed, his voice a mix of sympathy and lightheartedness. "Yep. You'd think by now I'd be better at it," I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to me. He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "You know, we could always just stick to the plan." I blinked, caught off guard. "What? You mean the pact? You're kidding, right?" He chuckled, but his voice was steady. "Why would I be kidding? 30's not so far off. And I think we'd make each other happy." The line went silent for a beat, the weight of his words settling over us. "Sam, I said softly, "Are you serious?" "I mean, yeah," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Think about it. We already know each other better than anyone else. And I don't know, it just feels right." I didn't know what to say, so I laughed it off. "All right, well, let's not book the chapel just yet." He chuckled. "All right. But don't say I didn't warn you." A few months before my 30th birthday, I visited him again. By then, the idea of the pact had become something we actually talked about in more than just jokes. One night, we found ourselves sitting in his backyard, sharing a bottle of wine, wrapped up in blankets against the chill of early autumn. He turned to me, his gaze serious. "So, we're really almost 30, he said. I laughed, taking another sip of wine. "Don't remind me. You're making us sound ancient." "Hey," he said, smiling, "I'm serious. We made a promise, remember?" I looked at him, and something in my chest tightened. "Yeah. We did." He held my gaze, his face soft in the golden light of the backyard string lights. "Do you still want to?" I swallowed, my heart beating faster than I cared to admit. "Do you?" He took my hand, his thumb gently tracing circles on my palm. "I think. I always have." I felt tears prick my eyes, and I laughed nervously. "So, what, you're proposing?" He laughed, squeezing my hand. "Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just asking if you'd want to give this a real shot." I looked down at our intertwined hands, feeling a warmth spread through me that I hadn't felt in any of my relationships. "Okay," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Let's give it a shot." Over the next year, giving it a shot turned into falling in love with my best friend. There were still those familiar, easy moments, pizza on Friday nights, movie marathons, but now there was something new between us, something soft and gentle that made every glance feel like a confession. One evening, as we were finishing up dinner at a small restaurant, Sam cleared his throat, suddenly nervous. "So," he began, reaching into his pocket. "I know we've been talking about the pact and all, but this is different." He pulled out a small, velvet box and opened it to reveal a delicate ring. "I love you. I want to marry you. Not because of some promise we made as kids, but because I want to spend the rest of my life with you." I stared at the ring, then at him, my heart overflowing. "Sam," he grinned, his eyes crinkling in that way I'd always loved. "So? Will you marry me? For real, this time?" I laughed, tears spilling down my cheeks as I nodded. "Yes. Yes, I will." Sam grinned, his own eyes shining as he slipped the ring onto my finger. For a moment, we both just stared at it, letting the reality sink in. "So, we're really doing this?" I whispered, still a little in awe. "Yeah," he murmured, squeezing my hand. "We really are." We sat there for a moment in stunned silence, just soaking up the weight of what we'd decided, then broke into laughter that felt almost hysterical. The other diners glanced over, probably wondering what could be so funny, but we didn't care. We were suddenly 15 again, sitting under the stars, making impossible promises. Finally, after we'd calmed down, Sam looked at me, his expression soft. "You know," he said, "I think this is what we were always meant to be." I squeezed his hand. "Yeah. Me too." The next few months flew by in a flurry of wedding planning and trying to figure out what our new relationship even meant. We'd spent so many years as best friends that falling in love felt like learning a whole new language together. The funny part was, in some ways, nothing changed. We still had our weekly pizza nights, our inside jokes, our endless conversations about everything and nothing. But now there was a new layer, a depth that made everything feel more real, more precious. One evening, just a week before the wedding, Sam and I sat in his living room, surrounded by seating charts, color swatches, and lists of RSVPs. "This is insane," I groaned, leaning back on the couch and rubbing my temples. "How did we go from 'let's just get married' to 'what shade of napkin should we choose?'" Sam laughed, reaching over to massage my shoulders. "You know, we could always just elope. Forget the napkins. Forget the seating chart. We could get married right now and just get it over. I raised an eyebrow, grinning. Oh, so you're saying you're already tired of wedding planning? So soon? He rolled his eyes, leaning down to press a kiss to my forehead. Not tired of the planning. Just impatient to marry you. That simple statement sent a thrill through me, and I found myself pulling him close, our laughter fading as we looked into each other's eyes. You know, I whispered, I'm not even nervous about this. I thought I would be, but I'm not. Sam nodded, his gaze steady. Me neither. It just feels right. The night before the wedding, we decided to do what we always did before big events, escape from everything and find some peace. We drove out to the field behind his house, the same one we'd laid in as kids, and spread a blanket under the stars. There was something poetic about being there, in the place where it had all begun. Sam reached for my hand, his fingers warm in the chilly night air. Remember that night we made the pact? I smiled, looking up at the stars. How could I forget? I thought you were insane. He laughed, squeezing my hand. And you were right. I mean, who makes a marriage pact at 15? A couple of dorks, that's who, I chuckled, leaning my head on his shoulder. He turned to me, his voice soft. Do you think we would have ended up here even if we hadn't made that promise? I thought about it, about all the twists and turns our lives had taken, how we'd grown up together, grown apart, and then found our way back. Yeah, I whispered. I think we would have. I think we always find each other. He kissed my forehead, pulling me closer. Well, I'm glad we did. We sat there in silence, staring up at the stars, both of us lost in thought. Eventually, he broke the silence. You know, I never told you this, but I think part of me always knew we'd end up here. Even when we were just kids. You were always it for me. I felt tears prick at my eyes again. So he looked at me, his gaze filled with something I couldn't quite name. I love you. I've loved you for a long time. I reached up to touch his face, my fingers tracing the familiar lines that had become as dear to me as my own. I love you too. The day of the wedding arrived with perfect blue skies and a gentle breeze. As I slipped into my dress, my heart raced, not from nerves, but from excitement. My mom helped me with the last button and stepped back, her eyes glistening with tears. You look beautiful, she whispered, holding my hands. I always knew you and Sam would end up together. I laughed, my eyes watering too. Did everyone know but us? She chuckled, dabbing at her eyes. Pretty much. The ceremony was small and simple, just close friends and family. When I walked down the aisle, my heart did a little somersault at the sight of Sam standing at the end, his eyes locked on me, his expression one of pure awe. I felt the weight of everyone's gaze, but in that moment, it was just us. As I reached him, he took my hands, squeezing them tight. Hey, he whispered, grinning. You ready? I nodded, barely able to speak. I've been ready. The officiant began, but his words felt like background noise. All I could focus on was Sam's face, the way his eyes sparkled, the way his thumb traced soothing circles on the back of my hand. When it was time for our vows, Sam took a deep breath, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I don't know if I ever told you, he began, but that night when we made the pact, it wasn't just a joke to me. Part of me was already imagining this moment, even if I didn't know it then. You've been my best friend, my partner in crime, my rock. And I promise to keep being yours, through everything. I'll be there for the hard times and the good, the laughs and the tears. I love you, and I'm so grateful that we're here, together. Tears streamed down my face as I laughed, my voice shaky but full of joy as I began my own vows. Sam, you've always been there for me, through every high and low, every crazy idea, every broken heart. You were my first friend, my first promise, and now, you're my forever. I promise to be there for you the way you've always been there for me. To keep making you laugh, to be your home, and to love you every day, in every way. The rest of the ceremony was a blur of laughter, tears, and joy. When the officiant finally said, "You may now kiss the bride," Sam pulled me close, his hands cradling my face as he kissed me, and in that kiss, I felt every moment we'd ever shared, every joke, every secret, every whispered promise. As we walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Sam leaned in and whispered, "So, about that pizza." I laughed, looking up at him. "You better believe we're ordering one tonight." That evening, as the reception wound down and guests started to leave, Sam and I snuck away to our spot in the field, now as husband and wife. The stars were just beginning to twinkle above us, the air cool and quiet. "Well," he said, lying back on the blanket beside me, "I guess we kept our promise, huh?" I smiled, turning to look at him. "Yeah. We really did." He took my hand, interlacing our fingers. "So, what's next?" I shrugged, smiling up at the stars. "Whatever we want, I guess. We've got a whole lifetime." He laughed, pulling me close. "Sounds good to me." As we lay there under the stars, it struck me how incredible it was that something so simple, a promise made by two kids under a summer sky, had turned into something so beautiful. Sam was my best friend, my soulmate, my husband. And as we looked up at the vast, endless sky, I knew that we were exactly where we were meant to be, together, in a world that finally felt complete.